It's completely shut. All of the hospitals inside the camp are out of service, except very small clinic run by the Palestinian Red Crescent. And we just heard from a journalist who was one of the very few remaining inside the camp. He said that for about 3 hours there was very heavy bombardment around the camp and in the camp city center. Another video he shared in social media showing a huge destruction in a mosque and a building in the camp city center. Also, he said that the Israeli tanks are firing gas and smoke bombs inside the shelters where thousands of Palestinians are taking the UN school as shelters. Again, the communication with the northern Gaza is almost impossible, and very few people who still having Israeli SIM cards are able to send some of the picture, but it's very hard to verify some of the footage that been sent, and some of the information are getting from the camp. But it seems that the situation is very tense in Jabalia camp. This morning also about 4 or 5 airstrikes in Khan Yunis. Khan Yunis is the second biggest city in the southern part of Gaza, where also the Israeli tanks are advancing towards the Khan Yunis city from east and from north. We understand that there was some movement for the tanks on the northern part of Khan Yunis, and also the humanitarian situation is also very difficult in Khan Yunis, with hundreds of thousands of people are taking Khan Yunis as a shelter. Back before the ceasefire, they were told by the Israeli army to leave their homes in the north and go to Khan Yunis. And now the focus of the Israeli operation is in Khan Yunis. So very confusing for the people. They don't know where to go. Some of them, they went to the western part, and some of them, they are now far south in Rafah city near the border with Egypt.
Israel may open another border crossing to allow more aid into Gaza. I asked our Middle East correspondent Yolande Nell how significant the opening of Kerem Shalom would be.
Really hope that this will streamline the movement of aid from Egypt into Gaza, where, of course, people now are desperately short on basic supplies. And what we've seen since the breakdown of that truce 1 week ago is really the number of lorries dropping from about 200 lorry loads of aid going into Gaza each day down to fewer than 100. And so the UN, Egypt, others have been calling really for weeks for Israel to open its Kerem Shalom crossing, at least for the screening of goods to take place, the security checks which Israel demands. The Kerem Shalom crossing is where, prior to the war in Gaza, most of the supplies that went into the Gaza Strip each day, hundreds of lorry loads of supplies, were going in. And so it is really customised for those inspections to take place. So we understand this development is due to take effect within days, and it's something that Washington has really been demanding, has been negotiating for weeks.
Washington has stepped up its criticism of the way Israel is carrying out its military offensive in Gaza. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said there is a gap between promises to protect civilians and what is happening on the ground. Israel maintains that it's taking steps to minimize harm. The UN's top aid official has said there is no longer any meaningful humanitarian operation in southern Gaza. But officials say there are promising signs that an Israeli border crossing, Kerem Shalom, could soon be opened to improve the flow of aid. It comes as new images appear to show dozens of Palestinian men stripped to their underwear with their hands tied behind their back, being held by Israel Defense Forces. These images are at the beginning of Jeremy Bowen's report, a warning you may find them disturbing.
Video emerged this afternoon of Palestinian men taken for interrogation. BBC staff recognized the town of Bet Lahia in northern Gaza, and we've geolocated the video there too. Palestinian diplomats said these were savage images, evoking humanity's darkest times. The Israeli army said only that suspects were being interrogated. Posts on social media said the men had been sheltering with their families at a UN school and that others were killed during the Israeli raid. In this photo, the men have been moved to another location, which we have not been able to verify. One of the captives, Dia Al-Khalout, is a journalist. He was forced to leave his disabled daughter, according to the newspaper he works for in London. Earlier, at Israel's parliament, a prominent government supporter told me that only Israeli forces can control Gaza, not the independent Palestine the Americans want.
I think that when we talk about two-state solutions, we are using 3 words and 3 lies. It's not two, it's not a state, it's definitely not a solution.
So what's the answer, an everlasting occupation?
First, occupation is not the word. One cannot occupy its own land. Israel is not an occupier in Israel because that's the land of Israel.
So what about Gaza?
Again,
that's the land of Israel?
Land of Israel, you cannot be occupying it. We're not occupying it from anyone.
In Gaza, civilians are lost in the rubble of Israeli strikes. So far, the world is not close to controlling the powerful, chaotic forces unleashed by this war. The UN Secretary-General, saying international peace and security is in jeopardy, is demanding an immediate ceasefire. A Palestinian leader told me that the US and UK must not veto the next ceasefire resolution.
The United States of America and Britain now has the key. If they oppose a resolution about immediate ceasefire, they will not be complicit only with this aggression. They will be a participant in these war crimes. They have to approve the ceasefire immediately because what is at stake is the life of 2.3 million people now. Half of them are children.
Without a political solution, this conflict will go on when, if, Israel declares victory in Gaza. The war will not have a neat ending. 2 opposing forces are at work here. On the one hand, pressure for a ceasefire. On the other, the determination of the Americans and the British to give Israel the time it needs to achieve its objectives. And one Western diplomat I talked to was thinking about perhaps another month. Now, the UN Secretary-General wants to hurry that process up by putting pressure on them and also shaming them into taking action sooner. As Gaza's food queues get longer, the UN says it cannot run a dependable humanitarian operation. With hungry people jumping warehouse fences, Israel says world peace requires Gaza's liberation from Hamas, and that will take force. Jeremy Bowen, BBC News, Jerusalem.